Um, so here we'll go again. Hi, Jerry Marzinsky. Really lovely to meet you. And I'm recording this because this information is really important. Both you and I have worked in the fields of health, helping people to heal, and we've seen some very strange things on this journey. And right now, at this time on the planet, we are looking at potential destruction of our planet. We see so much division going on, and nobody seems to understand why. I have a feeling that I understand some of what's going on, and I believe that your background, almost 50 years working in with schizophrenics, with people who've struggled with severe trauma and mental health, you would have some great insight into what's going on. So why don't we start by introducing you? Give us a little bit of your background, please. I think you could do a better job than I could at that. And yeah, let's start with that, and then we'll just go into some questions.
Hey, Jerry Marzinsky, and like Janeta says, I've spent almost 50 years on the front lines of mental health, and not just light stuff. I mean, I've worked in hospital emergency rooms doing psych crisis for 10 years. I've worked in state prison in the psychology department for close to 18 years. I've worked in mental health centers. I've worked in private psychiatric hospitals. I've worked in state psychiatric hospitals. I've seen it all. Um, and the whole time, the one group that kind of was perplexing to me were the schizophrenics.
Mm,
It's like, what was going on with these people? And it made no sense. Um, they were constantly sabotaging themselves. They were shooting themselves in the foot. They would not allow themselves to succeed with anything.
mm,
They were hearing strange voices, which the psychiatric mafia insisted were hallucinations.
mm.
Um, they were virtually incurable. Uh, regular counseling, just everyday counseling that they teach in the universities, was like shooting a rhino in the butt with a BB rifle, trying to get it to move. I mean, it
I
bounced
love
off of schizophrenics. Like,
Yeah. I'd love to make a comment on this and then hear a little more from you from my own background. I was a flight attendant for 10 years, then went back to school in the 90s. And I was going to be a psychologist in the beginning. So I majored in psychology. And back in the early 90s, it was all about trauma. It was mostly trauma based. There was a lot of biochemical stuff, but a lot of what I saw was trauma. Then I returned to study somatic healing in the last 8 to 10 years. And all the higher level psych courses, it's all biochemical now. They've changed the textbooks. They're lying to the students. They're saying that all the psychiatric disorders are a result of trauma. They've taken away repression. So people like myself that had severe childhood trauma no longer qualify if we repress those memories for 15 years. They throw it away in court as false memories. There's so much that's changing for the negative. And the same in creative writing. It's no longer free. You can't say certain things. And the universities have gotten very shut down. And you can tell when you've been around for a while that this is all a result of the systems, broken.
yeah, they're controlled. The universities are controlled by big pharma. What they say, what they don't say. If they publish stuff that the big pharma doesn't like, their grants disappear. Uh, their money disappears.
Yeah.
Um, And one of the biggest lies that they perpetuated, I mean, they've perpetuated lie after lie after lie after lie. I mean, Big Pharma it's one of the biggest liars there is out there when it comes to mental health. They started off telling schizophrenics that the mother did something that made them schizophrenic.
Mm,
This is back in the 50s, I think it was. They blamed the mothers, and the mothers went, "What did we do?"
mm,
And
I
that,
remember.
that was observable.
Mm,
So they couldn't find anything there. So what they did then is they kicked it up to where the research was unobservable except by a very minuscule number of people. So then they started preaching, oh, this is genetics. There's something wrong with the genes, you know. And they got away with that for what, a decade or more, maybe more, you know. And then finally the geneticists came around and they, a lot of geneticists just aren't interested in studying the genes of schizophrenics. They got other more interesting stuff to do. But finally some came around and they started doing that. And they said, hey, we don't find a schizophrenic gene.
Mm.
It's just not there. So Big Pharma and the psychiatric mafia came back and said, well, it's not just one gene, it's a bunch of genes and they're all intertwined like that. And eventually we'll find what it is.
Mm.
There's nothing there. So when they were unable to find anything, they switched their advertisements to say that it is suspected or it is believed that, schizophrenia was a genetic predisposition. And still they couldn't find anything there. So they switched it to a biochemical imbalance. And that was a lie put out by Eli Lilly when they came out with Prozac. They needed some explanation for why their antidepressant was supposed to work. So they
Oh.
said, oh, that was a chemical imbalance of the brain. Well, the brain has 200 some, neurotransmitters in there. Those are all chemicals, and this antidepressant seems to suppress serotonin, which uh, or the serotonin reuptake. So it wasn't being metabolized, and so the serotonin would just hit more often. So they're thinking, oh, well, that would cure depression, but it didn't.
Mm.
You know, and uh, and one of the first things I realized when I finished graduate school, I got hired at a massive psychiatric hospital, one of the biggest on the planet, Central State Hospital in Milledgeville, Georgia. It's now out of business. It's now down. But when I got there was over 10,000 patients there. They had virtually every mental illness known to man in that place. And for me, I was fascinated with abnormal psychology. It was like a candy store. It
Mm.
was like here's all these things, why is this happening? Why are people doing this? And you know, th this I'd ask the staff, what are these voices that schizophrenics are hearing, and what causes schizophrenia? And it was all the same stuff. It's a biochemical imbalance. It's what they were teaching in the universities, you
Mm.
know, and so it went from Eli Lilly lying about the cause of mental illness being a chemical brain imbalance, and then the big pharma picked up on that because they didn't have any explanation either. So then they started promoting that. They started teaching it in the universities, and they brainwashed generations of psych students and medical personnel and psychiatrists with this lie. And
And
they're
it,
still teaching,
it's still going on, quite
still
severely
going on
too.
today.
I've noticed that some of my PhD friends that have gone further than I went, there's no reasoning with them, a lot of them, and it's quite sad because at these times, if we're going to solve our global problems, we have to have an open mind. And by the time you come through university programs, even an undergraduate degree, and then going into master's degree, it's ego feeding because the world, oh wow, you've done a master's, good for you. And you think, yeah, but then you start seeing what it's like on the front lines and you realize things don't make sense. So you went all
Yes.
the way through a PhD. What do you feel? Do you feel you learned more at university or learned more on the front lines?
Oh, the front lines any day. And I didn't finish the PhD. I got 2 years into it and went, no, I can't deal with this, you know, because they were worse than any of the undergraduates. Here you have these massive egos that are clashing against each other, and there was nothing clinically that they were teaching that I saw would be of any real use, you know,
Absolutely.
on the front lines. And on top of that, I'd already spent 7 years at this massive psychiatric hospital, and here they were teaching these different uh, mental illnesses, and I'm like, no, no, that's not what happens. One of the first things I noticed, you know, when I got to this giant mental hospital, nobody was interested in what the voices were saying.
Mm,
Here there are, virtually all these schizophrenics were hearing voices. And what were they? What were they saying? Now we were taught, and I believed when I started off too, that these things were hallucinations,
mm,
you know, and then and they also taught that they were, well, if they're hallucinations,
mm,
they wouldn't make any sense. So I came onto the front lines thinking, well, these voices are like word salad. They're not going to make any sense. They're just dribble and stuff that doesn't make any sense and just verbal garbage. No, that's not what I saw.
mm,
These people were walking around interacting with something or someone that I couldn't see, and they were carrying on long, coherent, angry conversations in most places and arguing with these things or talking with these things, and you could only hear one side of the conversation. It's like listening to somebody talking on a phone. You could hear what they're saying, but you can't hear what's coming over the phone.
right.
You know?
You did some fascinating research too on the patterns that these schizophrenics were showing up with. And I think that's a really important part because hallucinations, explain the difference between hallucinations and patterns, how you were able to start thinking that these voices could potentially be other parts of themselves or even potentially entities.
Well, if they're hallucinations, I mean, I've experienced hallucinations. I've seen people go into hallucinations, and hallucinations don't run patterns. They're random. They're all over the place.
Mhm.
They're positive, they're negative, they're neutral. They cover the complete gamut. You can't predict what's going to happen in a hallucination.
Right.
You know, but what was happening with these voices is they were running patterns. So um, nobody was asking questions about them at the big state hospital I was working at. And I was wondering, what are these things? What are they telling these people? Because it was very clear that the ones who were listening to these patterns, to these hallucinations, they were getting in the most trouble. They were sabotaging themselves. They were going off their meds. They were causing fights. They were, you know, cutting on themselves. They were attacking other people. They were getting thrown out of classes. I mean, they were the ones getting in the most trouble.
Absolutely.
And
What were some,
all I got.
I was just wondering what some of the most prevalent patterns were that you saw that I found some of your stories to be fascinating regarding how it became quite clear to you that these were not just mere hallucinations.
Yeah, it's after a while I started asking these patients, what are the voices telling you? Now it took about a year to figure out how to ask them these questions because there's no benefit for them answering these questions. Matter of fact, working with psych at the uh, in the state hospital, we were kind of spies for psychiatry. So
Mm,
if somebody was acting up or somebody went off their meds, we would go tell the psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist would pull them in and just drug them up until they weren't causing problems anymore. You know, so they were turning them into zombies. So those medications basically are a way to control the psychiatric population. They were,
I just would love to jump in and just briefly say my younger sister is autistic and she's in a group home with all schizophrenics and they've been giving her antipsychotics. She's never had any psychosis in her life. But it's just to keep her quiet because
yeah.
she's louder. She's a different kind of disorder. And she's just mismatched. But they have these people so drugged. She's been gaining horrible amounts of weight. She's less happy. And yet I can't, have no right as her family members to say, look, we want her off this antipsychotics because it makes her more manageable.
Now, these antipsychotics are dangerous drugs. I mean, they have terrible side effects,
Mm,
which that says something about their toxicity. Those side effects don't occur if those medications aren't toxic to some extent. And they've found that not only are they, you know, toxic, I mean, they're major tranquilizers, so they do the job of tamping down the symptoms and subduing the patient. But you know, they also destroy the central nervous system. They
Mm,
what they started doing was autopsies on these state hospital patients that have been in there for decades taking these antipsychotic drugs. And they found that their brains were shrunk like walnuts. you
mm.
know, and they published that somehow they got that published, past Big Pharma. And then once it came out, Big Pharma just went nuts and the psychiatric mafia, like, oh, it's not our drugs that are doing this, it's the schizophrenia that's causing their brains to shrink. So the researchers went, well, we don't think so. So they started feeding those same antipsychotic drugs to rats and mice and monkeys, and their brains shrunk too. Now, this is irreversible neurological damage. It
Mm.
doesn't get better.
It's
And
hard.
what I saw at the state hospital was when these toxic effects, the akinesia, the shaking and the tongue darting, and like that, and the quivering started. These are neurological effects of these drugs. What they did instead of backing off of those things is they filled them with cogentin to mask those symptoms so they were no longer available. They didn't show. Okay. And then the damage just continued. And it's worse than that. Look at this psychotropic drug statistics for children. Uh, this is from 2017. More than 7.2 million kids are on psychiatric drugs in 2017. It's much higher than that now.
Is that
Over
global?
six.
Is that global
No,
or?
this is in the US.
Wow.
So over 622,000 kids under the age of 5
Oh,
are on these high-powered psychiatric drugs. Over now, this is for 2017. Over 80,000 are on ADHD drugs, which are methamphetamine.
and that's
Uh,
gotten much higher. I mean, now it's a
it's gotten
trend.
much higher. And when I worked in the prison, a lot of these guys started off on Ritalin and Adderall and Atarax, that stuff, and then they just continued on with street drugs because it made them feel so good.
And the
Over
education
30,
system too, I'll just add in, they're targeting children in elementary school with these things. They're
yeah,
targeting children in their most formative years when their brains are still developing. You
yes.
know, there's, yeah.
Over 38,000 children were on antidepressant drugs in 2017. Over 85,000 were on antipsychotic drugs. These are the drugs that do permanent neurological damage to the brain. These people don't care. They'll sell you anything you'll take. Over close to 400,000 were on anti-anxiety drugs. Right? These are kids. This isn't the adult pot. These are kids. These are your children.
Horrible. And you saw as well with crystal meth and some of the heavy amphetamine use, you saw some people that started off not being schizophrenic into, adulthood and then getting into crystal meth and just having absolute nightmares with things that to me sound very much like entities.
Yeah, it was. I didn't believe in entities or demons, that kind of stuff back then. I was thinking I was brainwashed. I mean, what was it, 8 years of higher education, four undergraduate in psychology,
Mm.
two graduate in counseling, and two more in a PhD psychology program. I was fairly brainwashed, but I didn't trust authority.
Mm.
I just didn't trust it, especially when some of these lies started coming out. And I think it was the first time was see, you're not going to get access to the clinical population as a student, even as a psychologist for the most part. If you're a researcher and you want to do research on psychiatric populations, they're not going to let you in.
Mm.
You won't get onto the wards. You won't get into mental health centers. They'll say, "Oh, it's too dangerous. It's too risky. Risk management won't allow us to do that." You know, and I watched them bring, nursing students in, like green nursing students, and they'd come through and they go, "Don't look the schizophrenics in the eye. If you look them in the eye, they're going to attack you. Don't look them. Just walk by them." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" You know? And here's the instructor telling the students this stuff. The same thing with the prison. These
Dehumanized.
prisoners aren't real human beings. Prisoners are animals. You can't trust anything any of them say. I mean, it was,
Wow.
so they kind of demonize these populations. And so you're not going to get in. You're not going to, unless you're somebody like me that was already in there and then developed a curiosity about it. In the close to 50 years I've been working on the front lines in mental health, I never, ever once saw a researcher on the front lines, ever. They're all in the universities doing their bullcrap in the universities,
And the
you know.
psychiatrists themselves don't seem to be doing much research other than peddling drugs, right? And,
That's
and,
right.
and speak about the relationship between the attacks on psychiatrists as well as their rate of suicide. I mean, I think those are real interesting. It makes you wonder, what are they doing with these schizophrenics, and how are these drugs making the schizophrenics feel, and why do they have such a high suicide rate? Both.
Well, that's interesting. Those drugs make the schizophrenics feel awful. They're like drugged up zombies. They have no energy. Had a couple of people say, "Well, I just felt empty inside." So
Mm.
what it kind of does is it attenuates their highs and their lows, and
Mm.
just kind of keeps them mellow. Again, the whole purpose of those things is, you know, now what they do, they treat symptoms. They don't know what the cause is. They don't believe that the cause are entities. They still believe it's some kind of chemical imbalance, but even so, nothing's being cured.
No, and from the studies I've done, it's actually through emotions and symptomology where healing happens. It's by feeling it, or as in the MACE program, which we'll talk about later because I've done MACE sessions now. It was fantastic.
Oh,
So
good, good,
I did, yeah. Since I originally
good.
engaged you, I followed your advice. It's great. And I'd
Yeah,
love to speak
works
more
fast.
about that in the future because having studied EMDR, parts work, internal family systems, therapy for years, decades of therapy that I did both myself and studied, it's so much easier and it's so
Yeah,
effective for getting rid of
and
these triggers.
and very quick.
Very
I've never
quick.
in all the years I've been on the front lines, I've never seen anything work as well, causing, permanent change for the better.
Yeah. Yeah. So we
Very,
will
very
return
quickly.
to that because it's beautiful. But what I'm seeing is a lot of people I know are now on anti-anxiety meds or they're on antidepressants and they're just getting worse. They're slowly becoming less lifelike. They've lost their
Yeah.
vivaciousness.
Yep.
Those
Yep.
emotions lead us to our healing path if we follow them. But if you just numb them out, how are you ever going to get healing? And I'm not finding
You're
anybody.
not. You're not.
Exactly.
You know. I've never seen anything work better than Mace with permanent results. Um,
Wonderful.
and I've had, hundreds of hours of in-service training and all the, I dropped my license, my state license, because what they were teaching with that, they had all this in-service training and stuff. It didn't matter. It didn't work. It didn't
Absolutely.
friggin' work.
I
Mm.
actually left university as well in the last number of years. One, because they brought the digital ID in Canada last year. I wasn't going along with any of that, having come through COVID times and seen everything. I'm not going to participate in anything that steals my freedom and creates a digital prison for our children. However, what I found is there was so much lying. I saw so many trans kids coming through the university system being lied to being told that long-term results were less suicide, more happiness. Well, I've met these people in person several times, and it's just not the truth. We're creating, the universities are contributing to the hell that we're seeing on Earth right now. So I just felt like, no, I'm just going to self-study, and that's what I've been doing since. And it's so much more interesting, you know?
Yeah. So you asked about, and that's a question I had is when I was working at this big massive state hospital, they
Mm,
didn't have cell phones back then. So
uh-huh.
the what do you call it? The grapevine was this Milledgeville was a small town centered around this massive psychiatric hospital. There were 200 buildings there, and tens of thousands of patients, down from like 30,000. It's been there from since
Wow,
before the Civil War.
massive.
There were still manacles on the walls in some of the buildings there. So it was massive. And it was like I was wondering, you know, why are there so many reports of psychiatrists being assaulted? They were being assaulted at a rate because every time one of them got assaulted, it hit the grapevine in the kitchen, in the central kitchen. And like, oh, Dr. So and so got assaulted, and this guy got assaulted. They were being assaulted at a rate equal with that of attendance they're spending all their time on the wards with these patients, which was nuts. I'm like, what's going on there? I couldn't figure it out. It made no sense. And they were spending less time than anybody else with these patients. They'd bring them in, how's your medicines doing? Are you still hearing voices? If they admitted they hearing voices, they'd jack up their meds or they'd add more meds to them to turn them more into zombies. None of them were getting any
Mm,
better. They were just dumping them down. And uh, so the patient started lying to them, about, no, I'm doing fine. I'm doing fine.
mm,
So, like what was going on there? So, and that continued, and it made no sense to me at all. After 7 years, there was one gal who was, I was working for the Department of Vocational Rehabilitation at the time, and what we were trying to do was get the highest functioning psychiatric patients in the hospital, give them a trade, and get them out of there. But they would all eventually go off their meds, you know, and it was like, why are they doing that? That was another question that came up. Why are you going off your meds? You know you're going to go nuts if you go off your meds. Why are you doing that? So that was another investigation I undertook. But with the psychiatry thing, after 7 years, there was one gal who was doing good. She was a beautician. She was about to graduate. She made good grades in class. She was going to graduate with a beautician license, and she went off her meds for the third time.
mm,
So if they went off their meds a third time, we had a rule that, they're not going to stay on their meds, so they're not going to stay sane.
mm.
So let's take that one out of there and put somebody in there that's going to stay on their meds.
Right.
So she went off the third time. She went crazy in the beautician's school. I had to go bail her out of there and bring her back to the ward. And once we got her reestablished again, I had to notify her, you're going to be discharged. We can't, you're not staying on your meds. It's the third time you've done this. And,
Mm,
I'd ask her, why'd you do this? Why'd you do this? And she, she'd go, well, uh, she wasn't quite sure. She blamed the side effects, and virtually all of them that blamed the side effects, okay, that was their main excuse. The side effects are awful. But then again, psychosis was much worse than the side effects.
mm,
Right.
mm.
So I went to the DSM, their Bible, which is a bunch of made up
Yeah,
psychiatric
that's
diagnoses.
a joke.
There's not a single psychiatric test
No.
anywhere, you know, for
Well,
for any of those.
Well,
There's not
the DSM, what I found really interesting is the people that build that Bible um, sit around. discuss what's going in. They're paid megabucks, almost like the Olympic committees that come in and change a city and bankrupt the city and have this right. They create fiction disorders and
Yeah,
just keep adding more to make
that's
more
exactly
money.
what they do.
So pharma gets more and more wealth. It always seems to
Yep.
come back to more and more money for the corporations, and particularly pharma seems the top of the heap.
Yeah. That's exactly what they do. They make these diagnoses up.
You
Um,
had shared some interesting diagnosis that they make up in the past. I've heard you share about Japanese tourists in Paris or something, or
oh yeah, yeah.
all sorts that were really quite humorous.
Yeah, let me see if I can find that exact thing. But yeah, they make these things up. Um, they have these committees, like you said. They meet like once every 3 years. Two-thirds of the psychiatrists on there are associated with big pharma, and
Exactly.
I've heard that they are like uh, tobacco barn sales.
Yeah.
They come in and they have a new diagnosis. They go, "Oh yeah, I got a new diagnosis, and it's this and it's that," and they present it. And if they think they can make any money coming up with a drug with it, then they get it into the DSM. You know, but not one of those DSM. There's not a test. There's no objective test for even one of those diagnoses in the uh, in the DSM. Um, Let me see if I can find that
So they're based on symptomology then.
they're based on
And
symptoms.
then it could just be stress, it could be anxiety, it could be a million things, but they won't make money off of just helping the person to feel their feelings or go through whatever. So it becomes another disorder. They're paid very high and it's very political. It's just like, and if you can't find your symptoms in the DSM, then you may not get help. You might not be able to get the appropriate help you need medically as well. So it's just the whole system is really rigged to make more money for pharma and not really to help people.
Okay, here's the odd disorders. Here's some of the diagnoses they have, and none of these diagnoses have any objective test for them.
Mm,
These are all made up. They're dreamed up. They're basically groups of symptoms that that they have made into disorders.
mm.
Okay. Um, some of them are whacked out. There's caffeine intoxication disorder. Now, if you drink too much coffee, you
Half
know,
the world would qualify for that.
yeah, and the symptoms are anxiety, sleep disorders, and unspecified caffeine-related disorders. I mean, it's
Oh my
unspecified.
gosh.
Um, Specific learning disabilities, reading, writing, mathematics. 5 to 15% of school-age children have a learning disability. 80% have an impairment in reading, commonly referred to as dyslexia. Okay, that's a psychiatric disorder. Uh, Todd syndrome, confusion about how big or how small a body part are.
Oh
Florence
my,
syndrome,
oh my
when
gosh.
people
And
are,
then they can peddle drugs, right? Well, let
yeah,
me give you,
yeah,
with so many things like phobias and this and that, you see these people, they're not getting the help they want. They have a little anxiety in the beginning and then they're just drugged up till eventually it becomes a phobia instead of helping them bit by bit to readjust to whatever the fear is. So, it's and we just looking at our world right now and the amount of fear that's out there, people are just going on more meds all the time, and it's not helping us to get out of the problems. The crystal mething, Vancouver here where I live, we have such a drug problem. I thought it was pretty interesting, some of the stories you shared about the people with crystal meth addictions and how they ended up in jails, and how you were given such a hard time in the hospitals and in the psychiatric mental wards or hospitals, about helping your schizophrenics to try to understand them, trying to hear what the voices said, how you would be chastised for that, but given full bore in the jails, as well as some of the abuse that you saw in the jails with that one fellow, the story you told where they sprayed him with pepper spray, and then they shocked him several times, and then they sicked a dog on him because he wouldn't obey the rule that they wanted him to obey at the time. So
Yeah, yeah, they could have just turned off the water and not fed him, and eventually he would have moved. Instead they got this macho guard stuff. And they confronted this guy, and he was a big, strong, nasty schizophrenic. And these, I've seen, the 150-pound psychotic patients. Once they get angry, once they get furious, they become supernaturally strong. I mean, it's well beyond human strength, you know. And I've seen a little 150-pound schizophrenic throw two big guards around the inside of a cell like they were popcorn, you
wow.
know. And it's not, it just doesn't make sense that they could get that kind of strength.
Mm.
Yeah.
You
And I
know,
remember
sorry.
talking to a devil worshiper once.
Wow.
I said, where do you get your energy? And he said, they give it to me.
Mm,
It's the voices he was talking about. And I said, what do they give it to you for? And he said, they give it to me to get certain tasks done.
mm,
But these back to the mental disorders. There's no definitive laboratory test for any mental disorder. Also called mental disorders are concocted, named, labeled, and described and categorized by a committee of psychiatrists from menus of human behavior. Of course, pharmaceutical companies that manufacture highly toxic drugs to treat every one of these disorders are leading the charge to invent more and more mental health categories so they can sell more of these drugs and make more money. That's from a fellow named John Rappaport. I
mm,
think he was a psychiatrist. I'm not sure.
right.
But, they tried to get him passed off as medical diseases, and the medical establishment said, no, 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 you're not doing that.
Mm,
You know, there was there's no objective tests in psychiatry. There's no x-rays, there's no laboratory tests, there's no exam finding that says definitely someone does or does not have a mental disorder. That's Alan Francis, former DSM uh, task force chairman. So this is one of the guys who put together this psychiatric Bible. The DSM contains 297 disorders that are all voted into existence by committees and are inserted into the DSM. The first edition was in 1952 and it had 109 disorders. It's a complete work of fiction. Now there's almost 300 disorders in there and they're increasing every few years,
mm.
all to sell psychiatric drugs.
Exactly. And they don't work. Like one of the reasons that I was most excited to come across you and your work is that through the course of my own healing journey and doing parts work, internal family systems, where you start to see different parts of yourself, but going beyond into some of the work that, say, Robert Falconer has done, who I know I've saw a great interview with you and him too, where he's worked with what he calls entities. And I've seen this as well in my own work with IFS and clients, where these parts can be really awful, really angry, really evil, um, really controlling. And yet going to them and doing this work is what heals them and what sets them free from the kind of bondage of these voices, which we all have. This is not just the schizophrenics. I'm trying to create a bridge between schizophrenia, but also all the other disorders. And I also have a background in shamanism, and I've done soul retrievals and extractions and different things where when people have trauma, their auric field is entered and there's holes in the auric field. So we'll follow these energetic lines from the auric field and see what happened back then and cut cords, help the person to leave the entity or the old ancestor. It's not always a devil. And then I've also done a lot of studying in history and the First Nations people, the indigenous people, every single religion, going all the way back to the Sumerians, have writings about these disembodied voices that can actually implant thoughts. And a lot of the newer thought is that the mind is actually porous, like a receiver, and that
Yes,
thoughts come and go, and they can either come through us or they can come through controlling voices. And you can see there's more and more and more control being put in our society now. And we don't have to, that's a big topic. But this work of hearing the voices, being with the voices, and loving the person that's coming with them, like attuning to them, being compassionate, caring, that's the path of healing, not just
that's important.
blocking them. So,
Yes. Yeah, and it's I remember the first time that I saw that what I'd been taught in the universities was bullcrap. And during an abnormal psychology class, the professor had us read a paper that said that if two schizophrenics met up and they both all thought that they were carny, one of them would have to change to somebody else.
mm,
And even as an undergraduate, I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. Why would that have to happen? They're both crazy. Why would one of them have to change to somebody else?
right.
So shortly after I graduated, I was on the second floor of this big psych building, and I saw a new patient who was carrying on a conversation with something or somebody. And he's walking around just, talking to something or somebody I couldn't see. So I crept up behind him to see if I could hear what he was talking about. And he caught me. And I introduced myself. I said, hey, I'm Jerry. I'm the psych on this unit. Haven't seen you before. What's your name? And he said, I'm Jesus Christ. And I thought for a second. I looked him in the eye. I said, no, no, you can't be Jesus Christ because I am. And I was wondering, like, okay, what's he going to do? I'm sitting there on pins and needles, and he's thinking
Oh
about
my
it. Is it
gosh.
like this? And then he finally looks me in the eye and he goes, okay, we can both be Jesus Christ. Then he just strolled off, and they went, okay, what else did they lie to me about?
Hmm.
What else did they lie about?
Hmm.
And it
Oh,
was one thing after another. The second big lie I saw was that here they are saying that this is a chemical imbalance um, in the brain. And I never saw them give any kind of test to taste the baseline. So if it's a chemical imbalance, you're going to want to know what chemicals are out of balance and by how much. They never, ever gave any kind of test to determine, what chemicals are out of balance or by how much, ever. I never saw it. And I'm like, okay, what's the baseline?
mm,
Well, why isn't there uh, any kind of test? And turns out that no test exists. They don't have any objective test to test any chemical imbalance of the brain. They don't even know what the chemical balance of the brain should be. And here they are teaching this in the universities. Oh
mm.
yeah, all mental illness is due to a chemical imbalance of the brain.
They've actually just recently changed that, and they're now saying that this is what we suspected, but all we know is that the meds work. So we don't need to understand. But they're not telling people that unless you're in the upper level psych classes, you won't find that out. And they're still just saying the meds work instead of saying a number of other things. And it's interesting how um, even like the inventor of internal family systems, which basically specifies that we've got protector parts and we've got different parts of ourselves. And through connecting with these parts, we can heal ourselves. But people that are more traumatized may have like entities, more entities. I'm a meditator. I've been meditating for 40 years. And so I see the entity influence. I can see them drop thoughts, drop images, and I don't pay any attention because they would love to distract those of us that are on the front lines and helping people to get well. And I've seen people that have done this work like you're doing and I'm doing and Robert's doing, and I saw an interview with you and Laura Whitworth that was fabulous. They will sometimes come in and attack family members or create health problems in people that are trying to help. So there is a just almost a sinister influence in this
Yes.
area. One of the things you said is that sometimes they can just block the memory of schizophrenics. They might be trying to figure something out or answer a question, and all of a sudden they just don't know. And I don't know if you've found this, but I've found at times I'm very smart. I've got a wealth of knowledge, but all of a sudden I'm trying to think of something important, maybe to say in an interview or something, and my mind's just gone blank. And I don't think this is just regular aging. I think there are a lot of ways that we can be influenced by these other entities or sources. I just want to, because a lot of people that I'm going to share a page that just gives, let's see if I can go to pages. Um, no, it's only giving me because that's, oh, documents. Let's see if I can get it there. Um, No, it's not letting me go to my, it's okay, I won't bother. But what I had done is I had made a page on which I talked about all the different times that these entities or these voices, these disembodied presences that I believe are influencing our leaders and is
Yes.
partly why we're seeing the wars, why we see them have golden thrones while people are starving, why this world has become so ugly. And there is a lot of historical precedences in mystical traditions, wisdom
The
traditions that
archons.
speak about that. The archons, the
Yes.
Wetiko in First Nations,
Yep.
the Jinn
Yep.
in Islam, Satan in
Yep.
Christianity,
Yep.
all the way back to Sumerians, where they talk about the Anunnaki, which were the
Yes.
early beings that came and have been controlling us forever. And
And
then
what they do, they feed off of emotional energy. They feed off of
that's
negative
right.
emotional energy. That's their food.
Exactly.
That's why they want to
Exactly.
insert, they want wars, they want this derision, they want divisiveness, they want conflict. I mean, and you look on this, this is not an easy planet to live on. You know,
No,
there's
not at all.
conflict all you look at the planet right now. There's wars, there's conflicts, there's societies disintegrating. There's, you know, millions of people being killed and wounded in Ukraine. You
I'm
know,
sorry,
it,
there's an alarm coming on. Excuse me, I had turned everything off purposefully. Um, I'm so sorry. All my phones are off. I've got a couple of them, but that must have been an alarm. Apologies.
See,
Um,
so they want to blame this all on chemical imbalance of the brain. And here's Ronald Pies. He's a professor of psychiatry. He says, "I don't believe I've ever heard a knowledgeable, well-trained psychiatrist make such a preposterous claim that patients have a chemical imbalance of their brain and that causes mental illness, except perhaps to mock it. In truth, chemical imbalance notion was always a kind of urban legend, never a theory seriously propounded by well-informed psychiatrists." This is from
mm,
Ronald Pye. He's a professor of psychiatry. And here's another one that's there is no evidence that negative emotional states, anxiety, depression, hearing voices, or suicidal thoughts have their cause in the brain. Research has failed to prove that a chemical imbalance in the brain is the cause of mental illness. There is no objective test for a chemical imbalance in the brain. There are over 200 neurotransmitters. How can one or two be responsible for depression? The chemical imbalance theory was proposed by a drug manufacturer, Eli Lilly, in order to sell Prozac. This was from
Exactly.
psychiatrist Peter Brigham.
Yeah, and my experience, and I think yours as well, has been that a lot of the healing that does come to these people needs to come through spiritual means in one sort or another. We see the 12-step programs have worked very well because it's based on on something greater than oneself, on a spiritual principle. Shamanic traditions have always been based on spiritual. Um, and we don't know a lot, but our world seems to be trying to educate us in a very narrow, if it doesn't make sense, if it's not in the universities, just throw it out. It's not valid. And that's not what we find when we dive deep into these things. I love the work of Swedenborg and his work. He was
Yes.
a brilliant mathematician. He was PhD, just a major scholar, walked with Isaac Newton and some of the greats. And he speaks about in his 50s, he had a spiritual experience, which I had at 19, again at 23, and a near-death experience, which completely transformed my life. I had a very deep interest in the meaning of life, in mysticism, in trying to figure out why we were all suffering so much. And so Swedenborg talks about having devils and angels in both of our lives.
Yes.
And going back, you and I think, are about the same age, possibly. We had a devil and a angel on the shoulders of the cartoons
He,
for kids.
yes, yes, exactly. Swedenborg says you have two demons and two angels with you all the time,
Yeah, and you
and
did some.
they're the ones putting thoughts in your head, and the ones you pay attention to are the ones that'll grow. So at the age of 50,
Exactly.
Swedenborg, he was one of the world's top scientists at the time. He was the chief mining engineer for the Queen of Sweden. He's making her a ton of money with his discoveries and his machinery to extract silver and gold from the mines. So at age 50, he said that Christ came and told him, "Okay, stop all this stuff. I'm going to give you access to heaven and hell, and I want you to go talk to people in those places and come back and write about it." That's what he did in Heaven and Hell. And
Yes,
Swedenborg says
great
you
book.
don't have any thoughts of your own. They either come in from heaven or they come in from hell. So your mind is like a radio receiver.
Mm,
It picks up the
exactly.
frequencies that it's tuned to. So if
Right.
you're tuned to a very low frequency, like prisoners or murderers or thieves or robbers, that kind of stuff, that's what you're going to pick up from the demons. If you're tuned to a
Exactly.
higher frequency, you're going to hear more stuff from the angelic realm. But it's up
Exactly.
to you. It's like the Indians say, you got two wolves, one on each shoulder, and the one you feed is the one that's going to grow the
Right.
strongest.
The white wolf or
So
the dark wolf, right?
and the
And
dark wolf, right?
and Swedenborg was great in that he also said that on the negative, if you feed the negative, that includes money, power, greed, and self-love. And self-love wasn't like self-esteem, it was selfishness, it was greed, it was obsession about self. And if you feed service to others, love, compassion, caring, you will grow in that regard and become an angel. And therefore, you create heaven on earth if you follow the golden path or the path of light, and you create hell on earth if you follow the darkness, the greed, and don't care about others. And
Yeah, and
that's
you
what
said
we're
what they what
seeing.
they what these things want is they want you focused on the outside. They want you focused on what's happening outside of you. They don't want you concentrating on your spirit that you are a spiritual being.
Mm,
This is a
absolutely.
spacesuit. You walk around in it, but the you're not a physical, you're part physical, but that's not who you really are.
Absolutely.
They don't want you finding that. They want you concentrating on what's going on outside of you. They don't want you to realize your true strength, who you really
Exactly.
are
Exactly.
spiritually. Because
Exactly.
if you find out you're a sovereign spiritual being, that kills them. they,
Exactly. Because then you'll say no, then you'll stand up for what you want. You won't be crippled by fear. You'll make changes in the world. And I mean, if everybody finds out, but instead we've got pharma who's trying to drug down everybody,
yes,
religions which mix people up because the religions, although there's good that comes from them,
control.
absolutely. There's a lot of control, there's a lot of greed, a lot of church and state stuff we've seen since forever. But there's also people have been so turned off because of the history around religion. They miss the awe of everyday life, of getting in the water and going for a beautiful swim, of watching a sunset, of getting in nature, of exercising and being healthy, of meditation, all these things that's just,
Yeah,
tossed
they
aside.
don't want you to have a quiet mind.
That's
They
right.
don't want you to be peaceful. They don't want you to have a quiet mind. That's
Oh,
why
totally.
drugs like psilocybin are Schedule One drugs, because they quiet your
Exactly.
mind. You don't
Well,
have all these thoughts
and
going
they
through
give
there.
you totally. I had a near-death experience when I was a child, and I didn't really remember it because I was so young. But on in the Amazon at ayahuasca, I witnessed myself go through this as a like a third person, like I was watching a movie. I saw this near-death experience unfold and was super interesting. But I've had incredible experiences on many psychedelics, yet I haven't been doing them many at all because these other voices or whatever, they can shapeshift. And your auric field is more open when you're on psychedelics. So you have to be more careful. And a lot of the psychedelic journeys that people are doing now, 20 people in the room, one or two shaman, many of them not well trained, and really they're more for the money, extremely expensive. And when people are going through these horrible times, there's really no one for them. When you've got 20 people and they're vomiting and sick and somebody's screaming and these things need to be done one-on-one in a very controlled, loving environment, which some researchers are doing, but pharma's shutting those down. We were sure that they were going to legalize MDMA research and all the they've shut it all down in the last few years.
Right.
And there's great potential with these means, but they also have to be very careful because I know people that had mental health issues, did ayahuasca or other things,
Not a good
and
idea.
became psychotic. A friend of
Yes.
mine has had schizophrenia since his first ayahuasca when some goon gave him ayahuasca, then left him in the jungle by himself. And he had the devil and Jesus and all these crazy things going on for days. And it's never ended. And the poor guy has just lost, he's so lost now. And I've witnessed this right from the beginning. And lots of people are like that. So, it's this path of healing it's not just the antidote. In fact, I find I'm not even really doing a lot of the shamanic stuff anymore because these entities, or whatever you want to call them, I don't really, these disembodied beings or interdimensional beings, they can shapeshift. They can create images to kind of lead you because when you're out of your body, they can feed on you. They
And
can
they can
feed on
feed
you.
on you while you're in your body.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But when you're out of your body, there's real available loosh where they can go in and just feed on you. So it's yeah, clean living, healthy living, meditation, exercise, yoga, not stimulants, porn, distraction, movies. Like honestly, yeah. Anyway, I
Yeah,
just
yeah. Look at what's going on with the violence. I mean, you turn on the TV and it's all violence.
mm,
It's like by the time a kid gets to be a teenager, they've seen what thousands of murders on TV. This is the way you handle your problems. You get a gun and go shoot somebody, and then you got people like Carney going, "I'm going to take all your guns." You
mm.
know, where you're going to be a disarmed population, like in Britain,
Yeah,
where
and Canada
people,
too, to largely.
yeah, that's what he wants to do. I mean, if you guys let him take your guns, man, you're gone.
I know. Well, if we look at what happened in the Second World War before Germany came into all these other countries, they made guns illegal and people couldn't protect themselves in a time where
That's
they
right.
didn't have the kind of military that they have now, where they can just do
Well,
horrific things.
look what's happening in Britain right now.
I
You know, now
know.
there's no free speech. They're locking up the old women for posting on Facebook.
For
You know,
liking
they're
a post,
arrest,
even.
yeah,
They've
or
arrested
for
12,000
forwarding a post.
people or something.
Yeah, and
Absolutely. It's
and
horrible. And
they've taken away their guns long ago. So what do people turn to? Knives, and they're running people over with cars now.
yeah.
You know, it's the guns don't kill people. It's the person who's squeezing the trigger who kills people.
Exactly. It's the mental
And
health. And they're building the
yep.
mental health issues through all the violence, through all the stuff they're showing. Some of it actually has entity energy in it that creates more openness for people. I mean, horror movies and all these things that people don't realize. I won't even watch thrillers or any of that stuff because when I have watched different things like that, I'm in meditation because I spend 1 to 2 hours a day on average in meditation. um, the images will drop into my mind. And I'm like, ugh, I don't want to see that, you know? So the more we fill our mind with beautiful stuff, the happier we'll be. And the less these entities will have free run into our lives.
Yeah. And you look at you know, you look at the state of mental health in the United States right now. There's 50,000 people a year kill themselves in the United States every year, year after year after year after year. That's as many as died in Vietnam.
Horrible.
And
Horrible.
in Canada right now, they're they got that voluntary
The main,
death thing,
yeah,
you know, and
absolutely.
they're making a business out of it. They're taking the organs out of those people
I know.
and
I've heard
selling them,
about that. Yeah,
you know.
there's a massive organ industry on the black market and has been for a long time. Not only that, now Canada has made a proposal, because I live here, to allow children under the age of 18 to opt into MAID. Meanwhile,
Oh,
they've
for
started.
crying out loud.
Yeah. And do you know all the Senate approved it? There was a lot of conservatives that were against it. I'm not going to go left or right here because I believe they use politics to divide us. But in that case, it was 100% on the liberals to bring this in. And basically they want to call children mature children, and then they will allow them to take their lives as children, which they've done as
It's
well. In BC, where I live, they have made it so that if a child wants to change their sex, they don't even need one parent's signature.
oh, for crying
One.
out loud. See
Not
that
one. They
you guys
all
got you that's
It's
I hope
terrible. All
I
they need
hope
to
you
do.
guys succeed. I hope you succeed from Canada because they're
Oh,
choking you guys.
I
They are
know.
choking you
It's
guys with their
terrible.
insanity.
And
Carney's
that's why
just a
we have
he's a
to talk
puppet of the
about
deep
this stuff.
state.
We have to talk
Carney's
about this
he,
stuff because
he's a
people,
freaking puppet.
oh,
He's a
absolutely. They're
puppet
all
of the deep
puppets.
state.
They're all puppets. Like the mainstream media will not talk about these super important issues, yet they'll distract us like crazy with all these other things, show us war stuff, show us, but they're not talking about the digital ID, which will start with, well, if you want to travel for your safety, you need this. For your safety, for your
Oh
bank
yeah,
accounts,
for
you need this.
safety.
And
Yeah.
sooner or later, they'll make it so small. Well, now we need to take your property for the safety of the earth, which they're doing in Canada. A lot of private properties have now been taken over
Oh
for
no.
the First Nations people, they say, in conjunction with the World Economic Forum. The First Nations people will never see that, in my humble opinion. They will say they're giving it to them, but they'll say, "Oh, we got to round you all up in smart cities, get rid of it all," and then just
Yeah.
make people sicker and sicker and sicker with their fake food, their GMOs, their chemicals, even the technology we're exposed to, the 5G, now 6G, 7G, that is
Yeah.
super toxic on the body. They don't talk about turning off, the AirPods people are wearing in their ears and how damaging that is for the brain. Nobody hears about anything health related because they don't care about us.
No, no, they just want to use us for, you know, for their purpose. I hope your states come and join the US. I mean, you'd be more than welcome here. Your gun
Well,
rights would return, your taxes would go down, you would have freedom of speech again. You know,
well,
it,
what
it, it
what I'm hoping is that the whole world starts to wake up to and I or become more aware of how controlled we are, how the entities or the elites that run our world really do not care for us, how much they're trying to divide us using politics, using violence, using distractions, when they really just want to put us in digital prisons and make us sicker and get rid of most of us and just keep a few for slaves, like this whole transhuman movement, put chips in our body. This whole transgender thing, we all have feminine and masculine parts. Some of us are more feminine or masculine than others, but we don't have to chop up our bodies and end up with bodies that don't work and end up with illnesses. And all that we see is happening. The suicide rates for people that have gone through the transgender surgery are through the roof. Are they publishing that? No, they're saying the opposite. So
yeah,
we
yeah.
can't, we can no longer trust the authorities, but we have to do our healing work so that we start saying no. Everybody starts saying no. They can't block us if we all say no.
If we all say no, they can't. So, you know, we're getting sicker and sicker here in the United States, both physically and mentally. You know,
Yeah.
there's an estimated 24 million schizophrenics worldwide, and that's increasing. There's over 3 million in the US alone. You know, the CDC reports 132 people in the US are killing themselves every single day. You know,
This is
24 of them
oh,
are vets. Suicide's the 11th leading cause of death in the United States, and
this is
it's increasing every year. 2021, 48,000 Americans killed themselves, and it's increasing every year. You know,
this is so
50,000
hard.
died in Vietnam. Between 2000 and 2018, the suicide rates here increased 37%. An estimated from 2006 to 2016, the suicide rate has increased by 2% a year, with 1.4 million suicide attempts in 2017 and 47,000 deaths. You know, 10,000 Americans are diagnosed with schizophrenia every year. It's among the top 10 world health problems on the planet. And it's increasing. You know, it's increasing because of this bull crap that they're feeding us. You know,
Absolutely.
it's
I found it very interesting in some of your interviews where the whole suicide thing has come up because suicide is heartbreaking. And these entities want to feed. They don't, I believe, they don't really care if the people survive, even though they want to make them as miserable as they can so they can feed them an ever-present supply of loosh. But if they make somebody kill themselves, the whole family suffers
yes, yeah,
and all the ancestors. And mental
right.
illness gets worse over time. You lose somebody from mental illness if you don't heal that. I mean, you lose somebody from suicide. That is tormentuous. And
Yes.
I just think like I've had a couple of close people suicide. I have four people that I know well that chose MAID in the last few years. They're actually giving MAID coupons to addictions counselors now to hand out to these kids coming in struggling with addictions as an alternative, not just kids, sometimes adults, but this is a suggestion going forward. And this whole mental illness thing, we're not going to cure it with the drugs. We're going to cure it with open, honest conversations and doing healing methods like MACE. Like MACE, anybody can do without any problems coming long term, like can happen with ayahuasca or some of the plant medicines.
Yeah, there's no
And
drugs involved.
yeah, I'm just going to show this is a cool book, Energy Over Mind, that John Mace wrote. And I also want to bring attention to your book, which I find fantastic, An Amazing Journey into the Psychotic Mind, breaking the myth of breaking the spell of the ivory tower. Um, and because honestly, I think as people educate themselves more in these voices, these entities, realizing we all have them, if everybody was taught as children to sit in silence, no particular, don't need to know a mantra or anything. Just sit and witness. You start seeing that it's not just your thoughts. And then you're no longer
Exactly.
having to deny that. And then you can still your mind. So then those exterior thoughts that aren't yours really show up. And so do the
Yeah.
significant spiritual ones, downloads where source might be saying, hey, sweetheart, reach out to this fellow for an interview. He's got some really good stuff here, as I did with you, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so,
In 8 years of studying psychology, I have never, ever heard any of the professors in and or any of the books ever ask where do thoughts come from?
yeah,
Ever. Not once.
yeah,
Nobody's ever found a thought in anybody's brain, you know.
right.
So, you where do they come from? The
Exactly.
Swedenborg says they
Yeah,
come from either heaven or they come from hell.
exactly.
You're the receiver, you know.
Exactly.
And here they are blaming it on, you know, uh, chemical imbalances of the brain, you
Yeah,
know, everything except, something spiritual. It's
absolutely. And you did some work with Van Dusen. Speak to us a little
yes.
bit about Van Dusen and his work.
Well, Van Dusen wrote the book. Uh, what was it? The Presence of Other Worlds.
Mm,
Okay, and what the experiences I was having is when when I was in the psychiatric hospital, the first one, I started asking these patients, these psychiatric patients, what are the voices telling them? And these patterns started emerging. But after one or two of them came up, um, the voices in one of them got pissed off and told the person to go tell psychiatry that I was asking them questions that they didn't like. I
mm,
got called up into his office next morning and told the voices are hallucinations.
mm,
You're making these patients worse by encouraging or reinforcing their hallucinations that
mm.
these are, you know, something else and shut up. So
Oh,
basically,
sad.
if you don't stop asking them questions, there will be repercussions.
Yeah.
So I was ordered to stop asking them questions about what these voices are and how they're behaving.
Can you speak to us about how you've seen some of these schizophrenics heal and how they did that? Because we're taught there is no cure. You just have to stay on drugs forever, ever, kill your brain, lose your
That's bull crap.
family, lose everything you
There's
love, everyone you've ever loved. Like we see the families of schizophrenics just so divided, so torn. Horrible.
no there's a small group of MACE practitioners that are working heavily with schizophrenics now, and I'd say
Wow.
we got a cure rate of probably around 30% of the people who come to us, and
Wow.
the
Amazing.
other ones are better. So that's much better than psychiatry has. You know,
Right. Right.
so psychiatry, all they do with their drugs is they tamp down symptoms. They say it works. It works to tamp down symptoms. They're not curing anything. They're not getting at the cause of anything,
Mm.
which Mace does. And that's why the book Mace wrote is called Causism, because it gets to the cause of the problems. Okay?
Right. Right.
So um, the way I started off was by these patterns that started appearing. And
Right.
one of the first patterns I saw when I started asking these patients, what are these voices telling you? Is that the pattern that was most representative was they were consistently negative.
Mm.
They were consistently negative, derogatory, insulting, abusive, and destructive. You
Mm.
know, sometimes they pretended to be helpers, but then they'd eventually turn on the people.
Mm.
So they were always negative. You
Yeah.
know, and here's psychiatry saying, well, they're hallucinations.
Mm.
Well, if they're hallucinations, then they would be random.
Yeah.
These things are consistent. This was the first pattern. They're consistently negative. What holds them onto that pattern? Why aren't they random like all other hallucinations? They weren't.
No,
They were
then these
consistently
entities have
negative.
more loose, right? Like there's more to feed on.
Yes. So I was under asked myself, well, what keeps them on that negative pattern? How come they're not random? That was the first thought. It's like
Right.
what's going on here? What's with this?
Mm.
If it's a pattern, it can't be a hallucination. The second pattern was that they're consistently anti-religious. They resist the victim attending church, reading the Bible, following any positive spiritual path. They're volatile if the person reads the 23rd Psalm, the Lord's Prayer. They don't want them taking part in any kind of positive religious anything.
Absolutely.
I had one patient come to me and said, when the voices came, I started repeating the 23rd Psalm. He said that they reacted like worms thrown on a hot frying pan. I'll never forget that. So I started passing that 23rd Psalm out to my other schizophrenic patients and asking them, bringing them back in a week and said, well, what happened? They said the voices hated it. They absolutely hated it. So
Mhm.
they foster and they create negative emotion. They energetically drain their victims.
Mm.
So I did one experiment where I asked the patient, how much energy do you have? It was just a simple 1 to 10 scale. How much energy do you have before the voices attacked you? How much energy do you have after the voices attacked you? And there was a valid statistical difference between the two. I think
Oh,
we ran an analysis of variance on it. It was a statistically meaningful difference.
I
So
bet.
these things are actually draining the person's victim
Mm.
energy.
Mm.
I remember one of them saying, I could feel the energy leaving when they're there.
Mm.
Another one said, I was so drained after they attacked me that it was like I was working in the hot sun all day. So these patterns, for all any of you working with schizophrenics in the clinical area, go to my website at jerrymarzinsky.com, then go to articles. This list of patterns is there. You can see them for yourself. They're not hidden. Get
Yeah,
them out. Ask your patients, are these things happening? And you will see these patterns yourself. And if these voices are running patterns, they can't be hallucinations like the freaking psychiatric mafia is lying to you about. They
exactly.
get they get louder after sunset consistently. They get louder when ignored. I remember one psychiatrist saying, "Oh, just ignore them. They're hallucinations." I brought that guy in back a week later. I said, "Well, how'd that work out for you?" He said, "It didn't work at all. They got louder when I tried to ignore them. They got more persistent. They
Mm.
foster self-destructive behavior. They get the person to self-sabotage themselves. They increase turmoil and suffering. They interfere with their schooling. They interfere with any positive path that they want to take. They foster isolation. They want that person locked in their bedroom by themselves. So all there is the voices and them. Any parent that tries to help the patient, they're treated by the voices as enemies. The voices will tell them, "Oh, they're plotting against you. They really don't like you. They don't love you. They're just a pain in the butt. Stay away from them. They're just trying to destroy you.
Mm.
Um, the voices demand the attention of the victims. They won't let them do anything else. They constantly grabbing their attention. They maneuver for increased control. They're constantly pushing for more control over the person's mind.
Mm.
So if the person thinks that they are part of themselves. So this is something that it's very dastardly and demonic about psychiatry. They're telling these people that their minds are broken.
Mm.
There's nothing they can do except take their toxic drugs. They have no control over these voices. There's nothing they can do about them, which is it's a friggin' lie. It's a malicious lie. It
Mm.
takes away all their hope.
Mm.
It takes away any attempt for them to try to break themselves free. So,
Mm.
even if they get a little bit of control over these voices, they feel a lot better because, if they believe that the voices are who they are, that these voices are coming from their brain because their brain is broken due to some chemical imbalance, it takes away all control, takes away all
Absolutely.
hope,
And
you
I
know.
think I think it's a good time to look at Well, if some of us have more trauma than others, and there's so much work, R.D. Laing wrote some interesting stuff around schizophrenics way back when. Um, uh,
Yeah,
regardless, and he had a more compassionate humanitarian perspective towards them. But I think that if we look at all these patterns, it's not just how they affect the schizophrenics, it's all of us to a smaller
yes,
degree. So they
yeah,
want us isolated. They'll say, oh, they don't really like you. From the age
right.
of, I don't remember, so young, I had some childhood abuse. So I just remember always hearing a voice saying, if people knew you, they wouldn't like you. I
Hmm.
remember hearing this over and over again.
So
And pretty soon I would say, why am I always telling myself that? And it made me more afraid to approach others. I mean,
yes,
and this is before elementary school, like,
yes,
my goodness, and that was from my trauma. And, because the more traumatized we are, and I was on a horrible path, personally, like, if it wasn't for the first spiritual experience I had, a mystical experience at 19 that just kind of changed my trajectory and started me working. But I had eating disorders, I had depression, anxiety, all sorts of things, which are long gone now. I have peace of mind, and my mind is not a busy mind, but it's required training, it's required work, it's required healing, and yet they're doing everything out there. So anybody who's traumatized can just keep distracting themselves, like Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. I don't know if you ever read that Huxley book, but it's where the government feeds them all of this soma, this drug, and makes everybody open. Nobody gets married, like, just the more the merrier, just debauchery. And so people are so distracted and so drugged out, they don't see the government just taking everything and basically killing them off. And it's like, Orwell had this pegged years ago too. Like, we see our world, it's becoming worse than 1984 with the technology and what they want to bring in. So the reason I wanted to interview you and bring this forward is because we have so much to live for. We can bring peace on earth, but it starts with ourselves. And it
yes.
starts with becoming open to what the hell could be going on here. Like,
Yeah, and you need to realize that, many of the thoughts that come into your mind don't belong to you. And
absolutely.
I've had prisoners ask these voices, who are you? What are you? You know what they would say? They would say, "We are you."
Of course.
If you believe that, they've got you. And that's what psychiatry wants you to believe. Those voices are you. Your brain is broken. There's nothing you can do about it except take our toxic drugs.
Exactly.
That's a massive destructive demonic lie.
Exactly. And if you look at our world too, go back a couple thousand years to when Jesus was around and the Gnostics. Jesus was a part of the Gnostics. He studied with them, and the Gnostics' beliefs were that it wasn't this big God with the long beard on the throne in the sky judging us all, the God of the Old Testament. It was instead a loving being, this beautiful, brilliant light of which we're all a fractal. And we can move into that light, just like Swedenborg describes, by following the light, becoming those angels, which is
Yes,
really what we're here for, to create
that,
heaven on earth. And
that's the last thing they want you to do.
exactly. And what was Jesus done? He was standing up against the religious authorities of his time that judged everyone, had everybody divided into hierarchies and whatnot. And he stood up for everyone and was the greatest social activist that ever lived. But he
Yeah, and
was
you
one
look
of
at
the Gnostics, and that sect was the early Christians, and they were all killed out. All the
yeah,
good ones killed out, killed out, killed out.
right,
Don't
right,
get it out that
right.
the Gnostics, there are two things were that it's not that God, that we're all God and part of God, and we can become more godlike. And the second belief is that there's archons. That's the second Gnostic belief that supplant thoughts, these devil-like entities that want us not focused on becoming like God.
Yeah,
So this,
Swedenborg said every negative thought you have that comes into your mind comes from the dark side.
yeah.
you know,
Absolutely. And that's what
and
Jesus was trying to say too. I mean, a lot of the Bible is very pure. A lot of it is, but it has been changed. There's books that have been removed. There's things like even in, was it the fourth century, the Council of Nicaea, where they changed all sorts of things,
right.
made priests unable to marry. There's been so much there. So to say that this is just purity without researching more is actually to starve yourself of potential miracles that can happen for our whole world by becoming more united.
Yeah,
Um,
and you look at the Bible, there's 23 times that Jesus cast out demons out of people.
exactly,
23, and
exactly.
what's the church today doing? Are they doing that?
Not at
They
all.
won't even go there. It's like, they go, "Oh, we're just gonna teach the teachings of Jesus." It's not Jesus is causing the problems.
Yeah,
It's these entities, it's these dark demonic entities. And the Catholic Church is doing some exorcisms, but
yeah,
a lot more need to be done. And the churches are going, "No, we don't want to get involved with that. We're afraid of that."
yeah,
They
yeah.
don't want to deal with it.
And even the
And
cornerstones of a lot of the Christian faith are like, through me, you can heal. It's through me, you come to the Father. Whereas the Gnostics were teaching, we are the Father. We're all different experiences that the Father is happening in billions of different forms on the planet, including nature. Nature is, incredible. And so some of these shut us down to others and they divide us rather than
yes,
allowing us to keep an open mind and finding more truth. So, yeah, it's very interesting because they'll give us so much good, but also block it through other means. So sometimes studying history and people like Swedenborg or, the early, look at some of the books of the Bible that were taken out in the fourth century where Jesus was married, to Mary Magdalene, who had been a prostitute. Why are these things hidden? Because they want to make it that he was just, pure, born of a virgin. But there's also 10 other religions that had a virgin birth, starting born the same day as Jesus. And it's all based on astrology, on the 3 days before Christmas Day, where this on astrological facts. I'm not saying Jesus wasn't necessarily born on Christmas Day. There is no doubt that there was an incredible, beautiful being that grew into the likeness of God and inspired many people. But there's been a lot of division brought by changes and false teachings and not allowing people to see the whole truth.
yeah,
Just
and it's like you have to go through the church to get salvation.
yeah,
You can't do it yourself. No,
exactly.
no.
Exactly. And Christians will walk away from non-Christians instead of realizing there's more to this picture. Our God is so great. Our universe is this universal love is amazing. I've seen so much and had so many mystical type experiences over time and the awe and the beauty and the love that can come by aligning with this source in light is incredible. And
And
people
there's a fellow during World War II. His name was Bruno Gonig, Goning, I think it is, a German fella. He used to heal entire crowds.
Wow.
And he's talking, that just allow the spirit to come through. The healing spirit. He says it's around you all the time. Quiet your mind and let it come through. It'll heal you. You know,
Exactly.
he's saying you don't have to go through a church. You don't have to go through any intermediary. He didn't take any money for what he did. You know, he
Beautiful.
he his teachings are incredible. They're on YouTube if you want to go
Oh,
take a look at them.
I'd love to find them. If you can send me a little email at the end of this with his name, I'll put it in the footnotes of this talk. But that's exactly true, that if we all align with source, we just bring more and more beauty. We also block out these entities because we heal our auric field, and they're not getting the loosh from us because we're not in pain. They only go for where there's pain, anxiety. I mean, they'll try to distract us. I'll be sitting in meditation and thoughts or images will come in. I just ignore them. But like I had an example the other day that you'll find funny. My dad has Alzheimer's now, and it's been very painful to watch him progress. And I was stopped at a crosswalk where this little old guy was walking by so slow. And I just imagined he was like my dad, because my dad's like that. He can barely walk anymore. And my heart was just full of compassion and love for this poor fellow and what it must be like to get older. We're all getting older. Then all of a sudden, this thought drops in my mind, bowl him over like a bowling pin.
Yep. Yep.
Just
That's
run
them.
him over. And I'm like, where the hell did that come from? It was so
That's
out of
them.
alignment with how I was feeling. But that's the kind of things they'll do.
Yes. That's where it's real clear that that's not your thought. You
Yeah,
know, you would never do anything like that. You would
exactly.
never voluntarily think anything like that. I
Exactly.
had something like that happen too. I was out in the backyard, I think a year ago, chopping down the cactus out here in Tucson. And I had a machete in my hand, and I was whacking this cactus, and my dog runs by. He's a beautiful, husky, pure white
Oh,
husky.
lovely.
And here's this thought comes through my head while I had this hatchet, this machete in my hand, is chop his head off, you know. And I'm
Crazy.
like shocked, just absolutely shocked. That wasn't my thought. It didn't belong to me. It had
No,
nothing to do with me.
no.
That happens to everybody. That's them.
Yeah,
That's where those thoughts come
absolutely.
from. They
It is.
put them in your head.
It is.
They're energetic entities. We're energetic entities in a physical body. So they can
Exactly.
go into your mind. They can pull up every rotten thing you've ever done, pull it up and start telling you, you're rotten, you're no good, look what you did.
That's
Matter of fact,
exactly what
after
they do.
being a MACE practitioner for years, one of the chief complaints of almost a majority of the people who come to me is that you're worthless.
Yeah.
I'm worthless. That's it. They had this something happened to them, and now they've and it's a shame because these women that are 70 years old, something happened to them when they were 6 years old, and they went through their entire lives believing that they were worthless.
Absolutely. Because
Inside of an hour with Mace, that's gone.
yeah,
It's
I know.
gone.
It's so
Totally gone.
powerful. It's beautiful. Well, this is the thing because if people don't know that, and to talk about Mace again, that's, they tried to bring that into mainstream and they wouldn't have it because it's too easy and it
No.
works too well.
Yeah,
But
they don't want it.
the reason I want to really get this out is if people realize that a lot of their lowest self-esteem thoughts could be coming from somewhere else, then they wouldn't have to feel the shame and guilt that goes along with, oh my God, how could I have thought that? Like,
Yeah.
what was I? And then feel bad and keep it a secret. And then the voice can go, oh, you're
Yeah.
disgusting.
See, they got you believing that every thought that goes through your mind belongs to you. And it's
Exactly.
one of the biggest lies that ever existed.
Exactly. And so if people don't realize our minds are actually receivers, that they're
Yes.
streaming thought forms from some of these satellites Elon's put up in our world, like, oh my God, I better get that next thing in the arm or I'm gonna get sick or not be able to travel or whatever. They have technology now that is blindingly advanced, and we have to have an open mind and see the big picture that they really don't care about us. They'd be quite happy if most of us were dead. And they just want more greed, more wealth, more. And if you actually go back into mystical traditions, wisdom traditions way back, it's our leaders are not for us, and they've kept us for centuries believing this. And before it was politics, we had the hierarchies of royalty, and there still is that,
There
you know,
still is that. But, they're
and they
still
believe
controlling
they're better.
Canada.
Yeah,
There's
they
there's
believe they're
there, there's
better.
still they're still trying to control the United States. Trump is the first
Yeah,
president who's ever stood up against the king and that empire building stuff over there.
Yeah.
They don't like it at all.
Well, it's
But you
true.
you you guys are still under control of that guy.
Yeah. Oh,
I
the
remember one
Commonwealth
time.
countries are the worst in the world right now for progression. We have the digital ID. You can't be a student now without taking it out. And people think, oh, it's not that bad. No, no, no. Where it's going, like 5 years ago,
Yes,
during beginning of COVID times, I went on the World Economic Forum's website. They had a diagram in the center. It said digital ID. And coming out from that, it was like total control of the masses for their
yes,
safety.
yep,
There was digital ID to passports, to travel, to pension, to government funding, to cell phones, to medical services, to everything. So
yep.
if
Just
you
like the
don't go along
Chinese
with
have.
it, to utilities, imagine living in Canada without heat, you
Yeah,
know? And electricity. And that is where they're going to take it. So we need to be saying no now. And people need to hear this because the mainstream media won't tell you. They'll just strangle you a little more as they take away more, just like they did in COVID times. They said, oh, they'd never take away our jobs. So, yeah, I lost work. My daughter lost her job as a nurse, because we said no. We stood up for
right.
human rights. And the people that stood up for human rights were called unacceptable. Our
Yes.
Prime Minister Trudeau used the same words that Hitler used against the Jews
What
in
a
the Second
goner he
World
was.
War. So
He was a con
we need to realize there's some real ugly stuff going on. We need to educate ourselves so that we say no and stand up for human rights and stand together regardless of political things. We need to, like, when you were talking about Trump, I don't even want to comment anymore on anything political because I'm seeing like it's a big picture of unity is going to require that we step away from politics because this has divided us more than anything else and instead focus on unity, on our own healing, on loving each other, on helping each other, being of service, and having some hope that together we can. Following their directives, we can't.
Yeah, I think that's kind of Trump is the first president here that has stood up to the deep state. He is wiping out the big drug gangs. He bombed this huge meth lab and fentanyl lab in Mexico, which infuriated the president of Mexico. But he killed 3,000 of those buzzards and this huge factory down there. And you guys got fentanyl factories
Oh,
manufacturing
terrible,
on
terrible.
your coast there
Yeah,
with Chinese imports. So
yeah.
Trump says, "Hey, 25% tariffs until you handle this." You know, and
Well,
he's
but
doing the same thing with.
what we have to be aware of, I think, is that we don't have the big picture with the political sides. Like I too was like really excited because in 26 I was in the States in Arizona living there when Trump was voted in and I saw so much infighting and insanity go on. But I saw a lot of positive changes for the next 4 years, right? From 2016 to 2020. So I was like thinking, go Trump. But since then, I've been following more and seeing that it is so much bigger. I did training during COVID times. I'm a yoga instructor, a breathwork instructor, and other things as well. But I trained in yoga for trauma sensitive patients, people in jails, people in hospitals, people that have been traumatized. And some of the instructor of the course I took, she's been working in the jails for years. A lot of people were saying they were actually abused by Trump, that he has been involved in the human trafficking. And I hate to drop this like a bomb, but I do because I need to just say that we all need to step away from
You,
the political things, stop watching it.
if that were true, the Democrats would have been beating him over the head with that
But they can't
forever.
get it out there. They cannot get it
They
out there.
can get it out there. They look what they did with all these other ones.
The women
They
that,
matter of fact, one of the people that worked for Epstein, that the lady they locked up, said
yep,
Trump had
just
nothing to
saying.
do with it. She said he had nothing to do with any of that.
Yeah.
You know, And if the Democrats could get hold of something like that, they would have beat him to death with it.
But you
There
see
was
that
nothing there.
that takes us back to the same issue. There's been several women now that I have spoken to and talked to that were abused. We have to realize that I think they're all in on it. And whether we want to believe that or not, it's really important for the sake of our world that we keep an open mind, that we step away from politics. I think it would be really good for us to stop watching their movies, stop supporting their junk food brands that are making us sick, stop buying into the pharmaceutical medication, stop and return
See,
to the heart of Mother Nature.
and that's what Robert Kennedy is doing. He's exposing
Yeah,
all these toxic
Robert,
foods that they're putting out, and they are
Robert,
after him like a duck on a June bug. They
I
have tried
know,
to
I
throw him
know,
out of there. They've tried to get him impeached. They
I
have done
know.
everything they could to get rid of him, and
And
he's
act
exposing all this toxin. He
totally,
said the U.S. is one of the sickest countries on the planet right now.
it is
And
absolutely.
and and here's all these YouTubes coming out with don't eat this farm grown salmon. It's not really salmon. It's colored something else.
Robert
Uh,
Kennedy has done some really beautiful things. I just think that for the sake of bonding with all our sisters and brothers on the planet, it's really good to keep an open mind and not focus on that the healing for our world will come from politics. It won't. It's going to come from each and every one of us doing our healing work, speaking honestly, becoming aware of these other voices, even in our own minds. I
well,
mean,
you can speak honestly, but if your government shuts you down, like in England, and locks up old ladies for speaking honestly, then you can't speak honestly. And
but
that's what's
we have
happening in
to,
Canada.
even if it means if all of us wake up, so we're all speaking honestly, they are going to be so powerless because they're 1%. And even like during COVID times, it was awful in Canada, but the police usually were really great. A lot of them didn't get the thing in the arm. A lot of people walked away from firefighting, from police, from all these things because they could see the bigger picture. So what I'm saying, what I would really love to end on is hope for the masses that if we align with purity, which we haven't seen a lot of through politics. If we
Yes.
align with purity, and the good ones we have seen in politics over the years get taken out.
Yeah.
So let's align with our own purity, just like Swedenborg said, and allow the light to guide us and bring beautiful people like you, people that care into our lives, so we can share truth, so we can help each other and really turn the trajectory of this planet around.
Yeah. I wouldn't trust them. The big thing here I don't trust right now is this safe coin or whatever it is. It
Oh,
it
that's
seems
deadly.
it,
You're
it
right.
seems like another. I
Absolutely.
mean, that's got
No,
red
no.
lights all over my head. That
Yeah,
safe coin
good,
thing.
good. Do stay away from stay away from the central bank digital currency, which the safe coin is. It's a different face of central
Yes.
bank digital currency that's not safe. If you can't have it in your hand, it's not guaranteed. So get something like even paper money isn't it's better. In China, they brought the central bank digital yuan in, so their regular paper money they got rid of. Well, pretty soon they started cutting all the Chinese off from being able to shop, catch the SkyTrain, whatever, because they liked to post or they did whatever. It became a major control scheme. Do not trust it. That's my word. I'm with
Yeah.
you 100%.
Yeah. Gold
We
and
have
silver.
to
They're always trying to take your wealth. They're plotting one way or another to get your wealth. The
totally,
inflation. You know the,
totally.
the gold and silver are the only real safe things right now.
Yeah, I think they're the best bet myself right now. I mean, in Canada, where they've taken land away from regular citizens, say, no, it's gone back to the First Nations, give them nothing for their private property. That's what's happening here now.
Oh
It's
boy.
starting to creep. So really, what we have in the old days, and this is according to old wisdom traditions, we fed each other. Nobody was homeless. Nobody went hungry. Nobody, if somebody was suffering, we stopped and helped them. Nobody died alone. Our world has gotten so misled by these other sources. And as we step into the light more, we will not let somebody go hungry. We will stop when somebody's crying and ask them what's going on. We will return to our beautiful humanity, which is a part of source, part of love, a part of goodness. And we can turn this world around. We don't, but it needs to happen now. I've never really led interviews very much. I've been a therapist. I've a kinesiologist, all these other hats I've worn in my life. But right now, we need to get the word out. I mean, in order for me to have this interview with you and post it on my channels, I'm streaming out of other countries because I can't be in Canada or it would be shut down. This would have been shut down, this talk.
Wow, geez.
So it is getting
Yeah.
so controlled and it's time that we speak out. So I really want to thank you. Man, you have the work you've done and the work you've done with Judy, the work you've done with Sherry to bring this, the work you've done with Cherie to bring Mace. This book, I hope that let people know where they can find you. I'm sure there's a lot of people that have schizophrenic family members or others that could really get some help.
Yeah, you can find me at jerrymarzinsky.com. There's I have scores of videos there on what the voices are and how they operate. Got interviews with schizophrenics who were willing to speak. You can sign up for MACE sessions there.
Beautiful,
Um,
beautiful.
it's all there. Everything we talked about and more.
Yeah. Well, this has been an amazing conversation. I'd love to get a little bit in about Mace before we go. Maybe we could even do another video sometime about it or talk about other things that come on, but share a little bit about the hope you've seen that has been birthed through this Mace process that you've been conducting and actually experienced yourself.
Yeah, I have experienced it myself, and I've been a MACE therapist for probably 3 or 4 years now, and in my entire career, I've never seen anything work as quickly or as well as this. It
Mm,
gets to the cause of the problem, the psychological problem, and then drains the energy out of it. So it's kind of like if you get a car battery and you drain it down to nothing. It's a boat anchor. You can't charge it up again. Well, these negative identities that Mace has found that are created by a trauma, and then the ego takes and throws into the subconscious mind and locks down there. Okay? That's a big pool of negative energy that's affecting how you think, how you feel, what you say, what you don't say, what you do, what you don't do, and you're not even aware of it. It's like a mind virus. It's like a computer virus operating in the background. Okay? So the program might be you're worthless, and then all its traits that go along with that.
mm,
So what Mace does is turns that into more a physical reality, and then it drains it. So Mace is it's if it has two spiritual components that aren't they're not obvious, but without them, it wouldn't work.
mm,
Okay? So what Mace does is it creates a bridge for that negative energy to flow out of that negative identity to the spirit, person's spirit, which is positive. So energy flows from negative to positive. Mace creates the bridge for that to happen, and it flows to the person's spirit, and this person's spirit turns it into positive potential. Right. So it's
wonderful.
like draining the car battery. After we're done, the worst trauma you ask the person, okay, how do you feel about going? Okay, go back to that trauma. Now, how do you feel about it now? They go, okay, I remember it, but it doesn't have any emotional impact. It's gone.
That's
It
beautiful. And
doesn't come back. It's permanently gone.
This
and
is
it
so
takes
beautiful.
about an hour.
Yeah.
It's very quick.
Yeah, this is so beautiful because my experience with the mace is that different triggers that I still had a little bit going on, no matter how hard I worked, I see the thing, but the triggers are just gone, or they're so subtle. I just see it, but they don't get me rattled. I have so much more peace
Yes,
of mind. And even after I did my mace session, which for me was about 2 hours with Cherie, um, I ended up having a trigger in the next few weeks before we did our next follow-up, and Cherie just nailed it. And it was so beautiful, and it's just been like it's really really helped. Because imagine if we have all those triggers, that is fodder for these
yes,
AI like
right,
interdimensional beings or whatever. They know where we're weak, and they use our weaknesses to put us down and to suck our energy from the fear and anxiety that our pain
right.
causes. And they
That's what they
remind
feed
us,
off of.
they remind us again and again of these weaknesses. But if you get rid of the triggers, they can't feed on you. And
That's right.
a
They're
humanity that's
gone.
not being fed of is hope for our future of bringing this planet together and cleaning up our world. Because, one last thing I'll just say is we hear so much in the press about climate change, but when the greatest geologists and environmental scientists actually look at what's going on, it's air pollution, soil pollution, and water pollution. And those are caused, 95% of that is caused by the corporations, not us.
Yeah,
And
chemtrails.
carbon is actually good for growing plants. Things are
Yeah,
growing more on the earth now because of a little more carbon. There's so much there. And every time these environmental scientists try to speak out about it, they're shut down. They
yes,
are blackballed, Nobel Prize winners. They're blackballed. They're no longer allowed. They're not published papers are not allowed anymore. Their books are being gotten rid of. And it's absolutely disgusting. So we just really need to know to look at the big picture. Our world is being really controlled through this climate change thing. They want a green tomorrow, which means taking all our belongings, putting us in smart cities, feeding us junk
yeah,
food. It basically means our death. And that's what
yes.
the digital ID and the central bank digital currencies are going to do. They're going to move
And
us
and and
quickly.
all these friggin' chemtrails where they've been spraying the skies with
Totally.
aluminum and barium, which are toxic to people and plants. They've been
Exactly.
spraying the entire planet. They've been spraying.
Yeah,
But ever
exactly.
since Trump defunded that USAID, those planes have disappeared from the sky over Arizona. I haven't seen
Well,
one for months.
I don't know. We sure have them here, boy, all the time. And the thing is, the trees are growing fungus. I'm studying herbology now. I've always got something up my sleeve. But there, a lot of our plants and wildlife
Na-
and everything is dying because of
NATO is paying for
making
that.
us sick. They say we're trying to block out the sun. We need the sun.
Bull
We
crap. They're
need the vitamin
poisoning you.
D. They're poisoning us. So it's like okay, we're all come together. Let's all become more aware so that we can make the changes we need to bring more love on the planet, to unite, to forget, turn off the TV, turn off all that stuff and turn back to silence, love, helping each other, the basics.
Well, you got to realize that there's an enemy on this planet that wants you dead.
It's true. It's true. But there's
And you,
hope. There's hope. We've got hope in each other. We've got hope in source. And just
well,
like
you,
Swedenborg has said,
people are standing up against it. You look what's happening in France. They go, we're sick of you, Macron. And look at
totally,
England. England's
exactly.
standing up against what uh, Starmer, that
Yeah.
friggin' Nazi. They're standing up against him.
There's been
Right?
millions, millions of people in London protesting. The mainstream news never covers it. They just want people distracted and drugged. But we need to be talking about this. In France, I've heard that, and this is through different connections. They want to move the wars further west, all through Europe into North America, like the whole world. We need to be waking up. And one of the reasons why they want to go to France so bad is that there's a lot of texts buried in France that speak of what really happened around the time of Jesus. That's going to blow this whole story up around interdimensionals and everything. And it's going to be a pathway to healing. And they don't want us to have that. They want to go in just like they did with the library at Alexandria when they burned the witches and they destroy for a reason, and it's to keep us from stepping into our power. And right now, that's what we're called to do. And I think I'm just going to wrap this up because we've been almost 2 hours and I've got another appointment coming pretty soon here. But I just want to thank you so much. You're brilliant with the work you've done. I am just in such admiration of you. And I hope we can maybe do another interview sometime if you're open to it.
Well, I've got people who have been schizophrenic who are willing to come on and talk about it.
I'd love to interview one of them with you. That would be fantastic.
I
Thank
I, I could
you.
arrange that.
Oh my God, that would be so great. I would even love I would I would take the recording to my daughter's or my sister's schizophrenic group home. There's like 20 women that I absolutely love. She's the only autistic, but they've been together for like 25 years, and it would bring them so much hope to hear that people had actually been able to find some healing with that horrible illness.
Oh yeah, it's not hopeless. I mean, I've seen dozens of people get rid of schizophrenia, return to normal. You know,
So,
it's possible.
it's beautiful. And with this healing, like we see people that might just have a little anxiety problem in their teens or 20s turn into agoraphobic down the road, never leave their homes and other illnesses because they don't realize there are these voices that affect all of us and that there's a certain path of healing for our triggers to quiet the voices so we can have fruitful, happy lives. So,
Yes.
anyway, this is beautiful. Thank you so much. And I look forward to chatting with you again soon.
So you're more than welcome.
Okay, I'm going to have to put on my glasses.